Washington, guess what? There's one player that I'm playing this week, and that's Terry McLaurin. And that probably should go without saying. The fact that Terry McLaurin would definitely be in your lineups. He had a big game last week, 7 catches, 125 yards, a touchdown. He is the target. He is the weapon. He is what Washington needs to be able to go to in order to move the football on a consistent basis, especially down the field. He's the only big play threat. I mean, besides him, Logan Thomas has been the guy who's been more consistently involved as far as target share goes, but he's a journeyman tight end. He's not a guy who's always going to be able to bring you value. He's a guy who's very touchdown dependent. And this isn't a great matchup against Cleveland for him. And there's a lot of really good streaming options at tight end this week. I mean, Logan Thomas is somebody who comes all the way down at tight end 22 for us. So I'm looking elsewhere. Now, why is Antonio Gibson not a must play? You can play him if you need to. Again, you're going to find yourselves in situations where you may not have better options. Antonio Gibson's going to be one of those guys where you may not have a better option, especially if you're the Christian McCaffrey owner, Saquon Barkley owner. Those are all possibilities. He's somebody who falls into a category of a not must start for me at RB25, more of a flex play. And the reason for that is Cleveland's actually been pretty good against the run game. Look at Baltimore week 1. As much as Cleveland was manhandled by the Ravens, nobody in that backfield really went off. Even Lamar Jackson. Now, as a team, they had a good collective yardage total as a team because you had Lamar go for 40 yards. You had Ingram go for, I believe it was close to 40 yards. Dobbins had 22. So as a team, it wasn't bad, but no one individual really had a good game. And remember, that was the game where Mark Ingram, actually, I take that back. Mark Ingram had 29 yards in week 1. Nobody in that game had an efficient day. Both J.K. Dobbins and Mark Ingram were under or at 3 yards a carry. And then look at Joe Mixon. Now, Joe Mixon had a little bit of a better game, a little bit more efficient than either one of those did, but he didn't have a big game against them either. And he had a lot of volume. He was also limited. He was also held in check. I think there's a chance here that this Browns defense might wind up being one of the top 10 run defenses in the NFL this season. That defensive line is playing really well. They're winning the point of attack. And last week, Antonio Gibson was the guy. Peyton Barber, after week 1, he wasn't a thing in week 2. He only had 1 carry. And he should be the guy moving forward. I mean, this Washington team is building for the future. They're not playing for this year, even though they're 1-1 at the time. So I expect to see Gibson get involved more and more as we move forward. The big thing with Gibson is him being involved in the passing game. So that's where he still becomes a flex play, depending on what other options you have. Because as that ramps up, and I expect that to ramp up even more this week than last week, he's going to have a nice little floor for you, especially when you're talking about half point, full point PPR leagues. So I like it for those purposes. As far as his upside, though, I don't think he's going to have an efficient rushing day. So that's why we kind of have him a little further down this week. That's why Terry McLaurin is my only must start when we're talking about Washington. Now, on the Cleveland side of the ball, obviously, Chubb, Hunt. I know Washington's been pretty decent against the run in their own right as far as efficiency numbers go. I mean, Kenny Drake had a solid game, but it took him 22 carries to get to 80 yards. But this Cleveland team is built differently. Their running attack is built differently, and their team is built around the running attack. So you're going to see Nick Chubb, you're going to see Kareem Hunt be more involved than the running attack for Arizona was, especially, I mean, in the first half. The Arizona, they ran out the clock. In the second half, they played their 4-minute offense pretty much the entire time. So that's why I saw Drake's volume start to really tick up in that second half. But in the first half, it was all Kyler Murray. Well, as we discovered against Cincinnati, Cleveland, in order for them to win games, has to be all about Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. And it doesn't really matter who they're playing. Cincinnati is even a less talented team, arguably speaking, than Washington, or at least on the same level, on the same mediocre level. Even in that kind of a matchup, they are still going to go with the rushing attack as their big weapon. So Chubb, Hunt, must plays. OBJ, that's where things get a little bit more interesting. I told everybody last week, sell high. This offense isn't built around Baker Mayfield. It's not built for Baker Mayfield is not built for the passing attack. OBJ is a matchup dependent low end wide receiver 2, high end wide receiver 3. He still has the big play ability. He still just needs that one play to go to the right spot at the right time for him to be able to convert. I still truly believe that. I don't think the talent has left him. But he's not going to get the consistent volume that you need. And then even to a lesser degree, Jarvis Landry, who has been probably one of the most dependable fantasy wide receivers over the past few years because this guy always finds a way to produce. Was it big? Was it flashy? No, it never was. But he always found a way to get you wide receiver 2 numbers. There's not enough volume. And if their main attack in the passing game when they do throw the ball is make sure we get OBJ the ball, first and foremost, well, Jarvis Landry becomes somebody who can be on your team, can be on your bench, but he's going to be game script dependent. So he's definitely not a must play for us because I don't see why Washington's going to be able to put the pressure on Cleveland in this game to force them to have to throw the ball more than they want to. So this isn't going to be a matchup in which should game script for more targets for Jarvis Landry or even more targets for OBJ. I mean, OBJ comes in as wide receiver 29 for us for the week. Squarely a wide receiver 3. It's not a bad matchup. I mean, Washington's secondary doesn't scare you, but the volume of Cleveland does. And it probably should go without saying that that also means that we're not playing Baker Mayfield. He's not a streaming option for us and probably never will be at any point this season. So we're going to move on. Thankfully, though, I will say that's one of the few games that doesn't really have much injury news, and especially coming out from last week. That's kind of a plus to see, especially from a fantasy perspective. But we move on here. We go to Tennessee. We go to Minnesota. Let's start off with the Minnesota Vikings side of the ball. Let's start off with a team that looks completely lost with a quarterback who is most overpaid quarterback in the NFL. Who else is a more overrated than Kirk Cousins right now, especially with the contract that he has? I mean, he had more guaranteed until Patrick Mahomes' deal. He had more guaranteed money than anybody, than any quarterback. Absolutely ridiculous. And he played horrendous against a not very good Colts defense. A Colts defense that lost Malik Hooker early in that game. So from a fantasy perspective, Adam Thielen might get left out to be drowned. And he was one of my guys coming into the season who was a fantasy bust for me. He was in my top 5 fantasy bust wide receivers because I was worried, kind of like Cleveland, I was worried about the volume of this offense. Remember last year, they only threw the ball 463 times. That's not a lot of volume. And even though Thielen was hurt last year, you just look at Stefon Diggs. How frustrating was it to watch Stefon Diggs from a fantasy perspective be as inconsistent as he was when he had to stretch about 4 or 5 games with no Adam Thielen? Because that's how low the passing volume was. Now, so far through 2 weeks, it hasn't been because of the rushing attack, which is what the case was last year while the passing volume is so low. It's because Minnesota never has the ball. Through 2 weeks, they've been completely dominated in a time of possession, which is also killing Dalvin Cook's touches. Now, the good thing for Dalvin Cook owners is that he's so good, he finds a way to get in the end zone anyway. And that's why he's an RB1. He had 14 touches in week 1. He had 14 carries in week 1, 12 carries in week 2, and he still finds a way to put up top 10 performances. That's just how good he is. And better days are ahead as far as the carries go. I do believe Minnesota will eventually get this figured out. They have a good coaching staff. Mike Zimmer, Gary Kubiak, these guys know what they're doing. They're going to make adjustments. Kirk Cousins is streaky. We know this. He'll have games where he looks like he doesn't belong in the NFL, and then he'll go on a stretch where he catches fire and he's playing amongst one of the top guys. And I don't know. I don't think this is going to be any different. The one thing I will say is that Minnesota has to involve another wide receiver outside of Adam Thielen. Somebody else has to get featured. Somebody else has to be a hot read to make the game easier on Kirk Cousins. And it doesn't necessarily need to be Justin Jefferson, even though it should be because they spent the first round pick on him. But that could just be as simple as, let's run some more screens to Dalvin Cook. Let's make some easy plays to our playmakers in open field. I think that amongst everything has been the most shocking to me. This is a team that was built on the screen game and play action off their run game last year. They haven't run any screens yet to Dalvin. And once they start doing that, on top of the fact that Dalvin's going to get more than 12 and 14 carries moving forward in most games, well, Dalvin will be right up there with Kamara and Zeke for competing for that RB1 spot. Now, there's no Christian McCaffrey, no Saquon Barkley. So I think better days are ahead for Cook. I think Adam Thielen is somebody who's going to be game script. And what I mean by game script, I don't mean in a game in which Minnesota has to come back from behind or they're having a high scoring contest, because that defense is not going to be the same defense that it has been for the past years. They have lost too many guys to offseason. They lost too many guys to injury already. Anthony Barr, now the latest victim. We don't know when he's coming back. So they're going to have games where they're going to be in shootout situations. But even then, it's more about game script as far as, are you going to have the football at least half the time? That's what the game script has become for them. That's what needs to go for Adam Thielen. They need to have the actual football. That hasn't happened. I don't know if it happens this week. What's the one thing Tennessee wants to do? They want to run the ball. Derrick Henry, his efficiency woes. If you have Derrick Henry and you've been worried because you had 31 carries week 1 and 25 carries in week 2, and you've been getting less than 4 yards a carry, guess what? Pony up. You're getting 5 yards a carry this game. Minnesota doesn't have anybody to stop the run. They have nothing in that front seven now. Their best bet is bringing Smith down into the box. Henry's going to have a huge game this week. I know a lot of people who picked up Henry in DFS, who own him in redraft leagues, were really disappointed last week against the Jacksonville Jaguars when he didn't have a huge game, a team he historically will torch. I think all that production you were hoping for last week, you're going to get it this week. I'm just double checking it right now, but I have Derrick Henry in the top 10. I have him actually at number 8. I'm looking at that now. That might be too low. He probably belongs in the top 5. Now, there are a lot of good running backs with good matchups, and that's why he falls at 8 for me, but it's not going to surprise me if this guy finishes in top 5. Ryan Tannehill is a must-stream quarterback, more so than Gardner Minshew. So if you were listening earlier and you were like, oh, I'll pick up Gardner Minshew. No. If Ryan Tannehill's still out there, which there's actually quite more leagues than I thought there was going to be, because I believe the number was about 42% owned, meaning he's 58% available on average throughout the major platforms. We have him as QB7 this week. You saw it last week. Even without A.J. Brown, this offense is just tailor-made for Ryan Tannehill. He can just play within himself. He doesn't have to do too much to throw multiple touchdowns. It's a great matchup against Minnesota. They're probably not going to have A.J. Brown this week. Comments he made yesterday really kind of suggest that he wants to, verbatim, he said he wants to take it slow, but it kind of suggests that it might be a few more weeks before we see A.J. Brown again. It doesn't matter. You have Jonnu Smith. Corey Davis is all of a sudden the thing. Jonnu Smith comes in a top 5 tight end for us. Corey Davis, I'm so hesitant to tell people to trust him. We've seen this before. Now, right now, if there's no A.J. Brown, he has a guaranteed target work share that kind of goes his way. And if he keeps having these plus matchups, he's somebody who at least is a wide receiver 4 who can be considered in your flex. I don't love it because we've seen Corey Davis disappear in the past. But for this particular matchup, no A.J. Brown. Corey Davis and Adam Humphries are going to get the majority of the targets when it comes to the wide receiver position. Now, I'm not playing Adam Humphries unless I'm in a full-point PPR league and I'm in a deeper league and I'm desperate. But Corey Davis is somebody who probably needs to be considered in your flex this week in half-point, full-point PPR leagues, especially against Minnesota.